And tonight's event will be absolutely a little bit or a lot of both education, if you will, from our ridiculously awesome guest speaker, Craig Lund, and networking among all of you attendees are ridiculously awesome people who have joined us tonight. So we're going to have both education and networking, and that is going to be just great. So, hey, let me introduce, yes, our ridiculously awesome host for the evening. She is our Vice President of Programming. She is Leanne Brandolini. Leanne, I'll turn it over to you.
Hi, everybody. Nice to see everyone. So I'm just going to kind of go over what the deal is today. So we're going to have our speaker, Craig, which I'll introduce in a moment, about 20 minutes of him talking on a particular topic. Then we're going to have some room for a Q&A session. And then we're going to be breaking out into two about 8-minute networking sessions, which will be randomly solicited here, and you'll be in private break rooms, and then we will end the night. So to kick this off, our great speaker today, Craig Lund. Let me just pull up my little information here. Okay, so Craig, he is a marketing and business development professional, selling to the C-suite, has launched 3 businesses in the past 17 years, is the president currently of Marketing Talent Inc., and then also an AMA past president, and is currently the Secretary and VP of Leadership Excellence for the Toronto chapter of AMA. And I don't want to take too much away from him, so I'm sure he wants to talk about himself as well. So Craig, take it away.
Sounds good. All right, so I'm sharing my screen, so you should be able to see that now. Thumbs up if you can see it. Awesome. Right. Well, thank you so much to the Boston team for inviting me to join you all today. I am actually the PCC leader who is supporting Boston, and that's how we had a chance to connect and get to know each other a lot better. I have a bit of a near and dear spot for Boston, as one of my earliest jobs with a global marketing staffing company called Aquint, which many of you might know, as well as Vitamin T, their other business. We like to joke, we call it the Aquint Business Incubator, because people leave and start their own companies, which is what I did. I started a company called Marketing Talent Inc., and I staff for Fortune 500 organizations across North America, in both Canada and the US. So one of the reasons I actually ended up getting involved with AMA is because I was hired to launch the business for Aquint in Canada. And we have this thing called the Canadian Marketing Association. As you can imagine, a lot of Canadians up here are always scratching their head, kind of going, what's the AMA doing in Toronto? The reality is that we're very different organizations. The CMA is a corporate membership-based organization. They're very involved in lobbying the government for things like the Do Not Call list, or what happens with how we handle cookies and privacy and all of those things. And as you guys know, AMA is all about the individual marketer. So let me just make sure these slides are working here. There we go. As Bob had mentioned, I was fortunately able to be a recipient of the Rick Sweeney AMA Volunteer of the Year Award. Turns out you just have to stick around for 17 plus years on the board, which I've been on the AMA board in Toronto for 17 years now, and that's now I somehow get an award, which is really fantastic. But one of the biggest things that we've done in Toronto, and it's allowed us to really compete in the market where we've got this big player, the Canadian Marketing Association, is a multi-million-dollar organization, and all of our chapters are all, generally speaking, under $150,000 in revenue per chapter per year. And so for us to compete up in Toronto with a multi-million-dollar organization is next to impossible. And so being able to focus on something that would allow us to deliver something to individual marketers that the CMA is not already doing It took us a while to find that, and we eventually found our niche, and that was leadership. And it's kind of wild to think nobody invests in developing leaders. It's absolutely insane. And yet, if you look at some of the facts that we realize organizations that have the best leadership have the best success. And yet, when you look at the organizations that believe that they should be investing in it, 83% say we should do it, but less than 5% actually do that. And what we found in Toronto through launching a number of our mentoring programs and now executive coaching is that a lot of people are trying to take care of that piece themselves. If you think about upskilling, everybody knows that that does not mean leadership development. What that means is I want to be able to teach this person how to do Google AdWords certifications. We hear about micro certifications and whatnot. Almost none of them touch on leadership. And yet we see a lot of organizations, I think I jotted down a couple of stats. I mean, less than 10% of people are actually natural born leaders. And another 20% are folks who have really good managerial skills and could, with development, become high quality leaders. But that's not happening. And we know that generally speaking, marketing doesn't often get a large share of the pie when it comes to learning and development dollars. And that's where AMA Toronto really filled the gap in that, you know, we've been running our mentor exchange program for 13 years. That's a program that's seen over 800 marketers that are mid-level marketers graduate. We paired them up with CMOs and agency CEOs over the last 13 years. That's allowed us to spin off another program called the Career Accelerator, which is a mentoring program for junior people who are 24 to 30 years old. You know, we recognize that people in the mid-level career versus the early career are in very different life stages. They're asking very different questions. The complexity of their questions are very different and whatnot, which is why we ended up developing two separate programs, but ultimately developing their leadership potential was very core of what they were trying to do. Mentor Exchange actually was something that was born out of our Canada's Marketing Hall of Legends program, which was an annual gala. We used to joke, we call it a dinosaur dinner because everybody who went there was very senior, you know, paid $500 to attend. But our general member, which for most of AMA is that mid-level marketer, or what we sometimes call the marketer on the rise, they're not going to spend $500 to go to this big fancy ball. And so we needed something to invest back in our community. And that's where we created the mentoring program. When that very first year, I think we charged $50 per person to join the program. We pulled together 50 senior leaders from advertising and marketing and got them on board and basically just did a match, put people together and said, you got 9 months, one meeting a month for the next 9 months, see what you can do with that. And we learned really quickly that, you know, there are some people that have fantastic pedigrees, like they work at a Coca-Cola or, you know, the Kraft Heinz, they've got these awesome brand experiences. Just because they have that, it doesn't mean that they're going to be a great mentor. So we started scoring mentors right out the gate after that first year. Disengaged mentors got fired right away. And after 2 or 3 years, we end up getting a really high retention rate of over 70% of our top mentors. These people also had great credentials. They had, you know, they had to score an 8 or higher out of 10 on like an MPS annual credit score. And we, if they didn't, we didn't invite them back. So 13 years later, that's meant that we've got this really deep, rich roster of passionate marketing and advertising leaders who love being part of this program and want to be able to continue to contribute. And so that's where the program started out and became, and now that's a program that represents half of AMA Toronto's budget. It's something that allowed us to have a huge amount of insulation during the pandemic, because as many of you know, All of our events, which most chapters rely on for their revenue, went online, which was fine the first few months, but it was harder to get dollars from sponsors. It was harder to get people to pay for tickets and justify those spends. And then, of course, corporations started jumping in the mix as well to start competing for your dollars and offering free events as business development opportunities for them. So now that made it even more complex for AMA chapters to be able to keep share of mind. But fortunately for us in Toronto, those programs are year-round programs. So we have built-in programming that's specific just for mentees and mentors. There's existing programming you can attend that's prepaid for as part of the program. So our revenue is pretty protected. As we were talking earlier on with Bob, was that because of the AMA in Toronto, our proposition that's differentiated us from the CMA is our focus on leadership. So our brand proposition is that we empower your leadership potential. And we look about the pathways of how you can do that and where you can do that. And AMA has become an amazing place to do that. So for us, it's either going through a mentoring program, and in which case you would become a member. It could be through the executive coaching program, in which case you also become a member. And then by being a member, having access to being a volunteer and joining a committee. We see that, and that's why if you want to be a volunteer with AMA, everyone's like, well, why would I pay to be a volunteer? Well, the reason why, it's the most valuable thing that you get out of being an AMA, and this is what we hear this from all of our volunteers. They are the most satisfied members. They get the most value out of it. They get to learn new skills. They get to join a committee and meet new people, grow their reputation, grow their knowledge, and grow other areas of their experience, leadership being a major one. And especially if you look at the marketplace, there are so many companies that it could be a big company. I mean, think about $1 billion mining company. Sure, they might be $1 billion company, but there might be 2 or 3 marketers in the entire organization. That person doesn't necessarily have access to leadership development, opportunities to develop their own leadership or to lead people. And so that's where something like the AMA could provide them access to that. I just want to see if I can get a show of hands from you guys. Who has actually had a mentor in their career? Right. I see one hand, but I can't see your name. You got the blue screen. Peter, can you unmute yourself for a second?
Sure.
So I'd like to know what kind of a mentor was this person? Was it a formal or informal mentor, externally or internally?
Well, I run my own business, so as pseudo external or internal.
So
it's a friend. I own a franchise, so I reached out to other franchise owners and I developed a mentorship with one of them.
okay, so it would be, I would consider that internal in that it is part of the organization versus joining a mentoring program run by, say, AMA Toronto or AMA Boston. And you're paired up with somebody that's not related to your company.
Right. Well, I mean, I've had other sales mentors and stuff like that.
Anybody else? Chris, Kate, tell me about you.
Sure. I've had 2 mentors. I actually had a SCORE mentor for small business. And then I also had my second boss out of college, who was a tremendous boss who gave me a lot of opportunities. And after I left working with him, he continued to be a sounding board for me, and trying to, ask like, hey, should I be doing this? So, I think it's when you align yourself with people that have provided opportunities to really shine and grow your potential. Those are the people I try to look to ask if they would actually be there to help me with questions. And I might not use the words mentor to them, but I definitely consider them mentors. So I've had 3.
How did you end up with them?
The SCORE one was literally attending SCORE meetings, and I had one that wasn't an alignment, but I had another one that was she had been a former head of an ad agency, so she understood my business. And then, as I showed, the last 2 I had actually worked with, and so I've been continuously able to touch base with them to get feedback, even to this day. The one that I started out pretty much my career with, he has been there.
So you find that when you reach out to them for feedback, what does it do for your decision making?
So I'm a solopreneur. So for me, sometimes that can be very lonely life, and you're, running a lot of things on your gut. There's no one to sort of bounce it off of if you don't have employees. So sometimes it's just validating, or they have had a different perspective because they have done something similar. And they're always very careful to say, don't do this, but have you considered, or, I know that I once did this and this happened to me. So there's a mix. It's always very positive and supportive, and not just, no, this is a bad idea.
Yeah, I mean, when we do feedback reviews on the people who go through our programs, I mean, that's a big thing. Is oftentimes we do know the answer, but our inner critic, or that imposter syndrome that sets in, is what holds us back from feeling fully confident about that decision. And you just need to hear them say, yeah, no, like that sounds like a good idea. That's how I would have done it as well. And it's just that kick you need to make that next move. Catherine, you raised your hand as well.
Yes, hi. For about 18 years, I had a marketing consulting firm and pardon my dog. And so I set up an advisory board. I worked with the a professor at Babson College called Ed Merrim, who oversaw an entrepreneurial class. And he had asked me to come in and speak about my business. And one of the things he talked about was having an advisory board. So I put together a group of people who advised my company for years. And it was extremely valuable for all the difficult challenges that we faced, whether it was the downturn in 2008 or it was always cash flow and HR issues that were particularly challenging. I think they always are. And he brought a lot of help to the table, but he also encouraged me to bring other people. So I actually had a couple of clients who then became mentors for me, or someone that I met through the Babson program. And so I had a group of about 5 people who guided my business. And I'm in a different stage of work now, but I think it's probably something I'm gonna reach out and do again in my new phase of work. So that was incredibly helpful.
Fantastic. I mean, I think that's one thing that we've learned, is that finding a coach or finding a mentor can be really difficult. I mean, are they going to really have your back? A lot of times people feel guilty about whether or not they're asking too much of a mentor. And that's where those formal programs can really fill a gap, because it is harder. And if you're very lucky, I kind of think about, there's a list of famous mentors that come to mind. And you think about Socrates and Plato, Maya Angelou and Oprah, Larry Summers and Sheryl Sandberg, Warren Buffett, Bill Gates. Those people are extremely successful because they had somebody as their personal advisor, as their mentor, and there's a famous writer named Keith Ferrazzi. He wrote a book called Who's Got Your Back? And it's all about creating that council that is going to be, Bob's inner council, Craig's inner council, somebody you can call up in a crisis or and you're trying to make a tough decision, so you don't feel that you're on your own. And as much as leadership is thought of as being the person at the top that leads the way, leaders who are never alone up there. They always have a circle around them, and it's the crux of why boards exist. And that is to support that top leader. Bob, you raised your hand. Did you want to put something in there as well?
I'm unmuting myself. Yeah, Craig, you noticed that. Thanks for calling on me. I never had a formal mentor per se, but I had a long career and still am in the thick of it, but in the agency business. And I had a lot of different bosses, and some of those bosses, especially early on, I would consider mentors because I was very young and they were quite senior, if you will. And they did, I feel, looking back, take me under their wing and taught me some of the basics of business, how to, just as simple as, corporate culture, how to behave in the office, how to carry yourself at a meeting, the importance of public speaking skills, developing leadership skills. I mean, I look back and think, wow, I worked at some great companies, but what was even more influential on my career so far were the people, and especially the bosses. I consider myself very fortunate to have had such great bosses who I look back on and now would consider mentors.
Fantastic. Thanks, Bob. So I just wanted to move on to the next part here, and then I want to talk a little bit about executive coaching, because I know that not a lot of people can really tell the difference. Some people know what the difference is, and so we'll talk about that shortly as well. But I did want to do a little bit of a plug. We published a book called Mentorship Matters. You can find it on Amazon. This was basically after 10 years of running Mentor Exchange, with learning what we learned about how to create success from creating mentoring relationships, how to create great matches for a mentee and a mentor. And then we also wanted to make sure that we looked at both internal programs and external programs. One of the things that is really poignant, and what we really noticed about the value of a program like this being offered by an AMA chapter, was that in an internal program, in a formal internal programming, there's a lot of great organizations that have them, including global mentoring programs by IBM that are well renowned, which we talk about in the book as well. A lot of the big banks and whatnot have them as well. The biggest challenge is that most people are only going to talk about this one half of your life called your work life. And generally speaking, unless you've developed a really great rapport, if you've got something that's upsetting you about a boss who's a lateral peer to that mentor and they're at the internal program, you're not going to be forthcoming with them. And that's where we've seen so much success in this program, is that because it's external, because there's a lot of adjacencies to how we make the match, whether the person's got that B2B expertise as well, or maybe the same industry expertise, and we paired them up looking at also personality chemistries. You would talk about things that and actually be vulnerable, creating such deep relationships that you often end up continuing with your mentor as a friend. My first mentor in this program was 13 years ago. She was the CEO for Bank of America for Canada. Huge job, super accomplished individual. And there's no reason why I would have a right to have fallen in front of her in the first place. And we had drinks last week at the Four Seasons to catch up. She's become a really important person in my life as a friend. And that's something that I find the external programs do have, because, if you can't talk about what's happening in your life, say you're having fertility issues and you're trying to focus on climbing the ladder, that's a very complex situation, and you would never talk about that with your boss necessarily. Most people would not feel that level of vulnerability with a person like that. And however, with these programs, there's such a sense of safety that they allow for it. Who here has had a coach? I see Leanne, you have had a coach. Want to tell us about who the coach was? How did you find them?
So are you talking about like coaching from like a professional standpoint?
Yeah, I would say not a sports coach. I would say like a business coach.
Yeah. Honestly, to be honest, I feel like that's kind of like a gray area between coach and mentor to me. And maybe I don't know if that's the point you're gonna try and I don't know if I'm making your point before let's go.
Yeah.
But I feel like there's a very fine line between coach and mentoring. I think coaching, I think maybe is more in my mind, what I've noticed, more of a coach is a little bit more direction and feedback, more of like action items. Do this as more where I feel like mentorship is more of a two-way street. That's how I would view that.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's absolutely correct. I mean, a mentoring relationship is much more bilateral. It is a lot more about sharing. Coaches are never going to divulge their own experience, and you would have to really ask pretty hard before they finally say no. Well, okay, I'll share you something. But generally speaking, coaches are people who hold up a mirror and they talk you through finding the answers, and so it's a big difference. Anybody else got any other ideas on the difference between a coach and a mentor? Peter.
Yeah, coaches usually you pay for, mentors usually you don't pay for.
Yeah, it's often a business service.
Yeah, and then usually, mentors will continue. Coaches will have a certain program and then they stop. So, I mean, my experience was I went through the Sandler program and I had, that's part of having a sales coach. But as soon as that program ended, it's like, oh, we can continue it and extend it. And it will cost you this much a month. Or mentors don't seem to go down that path.
Yeah, it's they seem to disappear pretty fast once the check stops flowing, right? Anybody else? I see David. And David's an expert.
Yeah, I just wanted to just add that a coach is responsible for creating the process that enables the client to learn things. And it's the responsibility of the client to change whatever they need to change. But the coach is responsible for the process. A mentor, in my view, is more about advice. And as Craig was saying, most coaches will hesitate to give you any advice because they want it to come from you and they don't want to influence how you perceive the world. They want to create the process that allows you to understand how you perceive the world and yourself.
Thanks, David. I mean, that Leanne, you also kind of alluded to this as well, is, coaching is very performance focused. A lot of times people come into coaching because they're looking to be somewhere the next 6 months. And oftentimes, coaching, you can have a coaching ongoing. Typically, there tends to be a plateau compared to the first 6 months of what kind of performance and outcomes you see, because there's so much work that happens and homework that you're assigned to get you to that outcome at that end of that 6 month that mark. And again, mentoring is constant advice. It's not always dealing with one problem. It's not dealing with one outcome. It's a very clear direction that you're trying to get from that coach and what you're trying to achieve. But I'm going to finish on that and go to questions with all of you. But I do want to mention that there is an AMA executive coaching program that is offered. Boston does sell this program among a number of other chapters. The program is run out of AMA Toronto. And if you have any questions, any of the AMA Boston leaders can get you in touch. That program is essentially a 6-month program that is, the cost is approximately $5,000. It gets you an executive coach twice monthly for 6 months. It also gives you a access to your local chapter as a super member. So you would be an AMA Boston member. You would get access to a full year of AMA Boston programming at no additional charge. Basically, a walking VIP of AMA Boston. So if you have any questions, any of the leaders can get you in touch with me, and we can send you more details about the executive program. And it's open enrollment, so you can sign up at any point in time to find a mentor and check out the roster of folks in there. So with that, I will open it up to any questions starting now.
So if you guys have questions, either if you'd like to put them in the chat or kind of like raise your hand, but I'll start with a question here. So what would your recommendations or suggestions be for someone who is looking to get leadership training or start a mentorship program in their company that are, they're not doing currently? What would be the first step to kind of get that ball rolling in doing it right?
The number one thing that you need to do is to make sure that you've got some really strong internal sponsorship. You need to have this really driven from the top for it to be successful. Whether that means getting dollars to be able to host socials and events where you can bring the groups together, having a clear outcome that you're trying to achieve. DEI is something that's near and dear to a lot of people, and in the AMA, AMA is very focused on that, and a lot of great organizations have put DEI front and center. And some of the most effective programs we've seen have been programs that lift people that are not necessarily as advantaged. Same thing with creating gender parity and making sure that women have more opportunity, and that an up and comer might be paired up with a very senior executive. So if that's an objective, build it around that. Get senior buy-in, get a stakeholder like the CEO or CMO to actually support it, and make sure that you are given all the tools to be successful. That's going to make sure that it's going to get off the ground. It's going to get whatever resources it needs, and knowing what the clear outcomes are that you're trying to achieve will help you with getting the buy-in from that executive.
I have a question on the topic. It's how you would define the difference between the mentor and the coach, and then just one's ordinary manager or boss. I mean, Bob gave the example early in the career that his manager provided, sort of did some of these, help you out, bring you along the way. And I'm sure lots of people, especially when they're younger, had bosses that kind of helped helped you grow. So how do you distinguish sort of ordinary managerial tasks with mentorship and coaching?
Yeah, generally speaking, I mean, mentorship tends to be a more intimate relationship, and it is about being vulnerable and being prepared to share with that. So some managers may do that, and but a lot of people tend to be pretty private at work, and they don't. Most examples we see managers providing support, it tends to be coaching. It tends to be, hey, you seem to be struggling with hitting these objectives. Have you got these things in place? And you often see, let me put a performance plan in front of you. So typically, the most common situation is that managers are using coaching versus mentoring. If you're really lucky, you got somebody who's prepared to be vulnerable, and they will be a mentor as well. I think, Bob, you talked about that. My peer, who's the co-chair of the mentoring program, he's an inductee in Canada's Marketing Hall of Legends, incredible leader, but he's been a fantastic mentor to me through being a part of this program, and being an advocate, supporting me, giving me advice, helping me make decisions and whatnot. And so that can happen through work and through places where you volunteer as well. Bob.
Yeah, Craig, I just wanted to add to something that was just said by Martha and yourself. So those two, I'm thinking of two in particular, just real quick, because you mentioned, mentors tend to be a little more intimate in terms of the relationship, so closer relationships, and you're more vulnerable with them. They're more vulnerable with you. One boss way back, a long time ago, we used to go out for walks at lunch and really just get to know each other as human beings. And I'll always remember those walks with this boss. And I know I was vulnerable with him, and he helped me grow and mature. And to me, that was mentorship. One other, ironically, as I got along in years and further on in my career, she was one of my bosses, and she was younger than me. And you mentioned that book, something about I got your back. That was an expression she would always use with me. And I so appreciated it then and look back on it now so favorably. She would say, I got your back, Bob. And that's showing, closeness, affinity that I think is rare in having a boss like that. And I feel so grateful to have had those two bosses among many others.
Yeah, I mean, the relationship's so bilateral, and that it's not just the warm fuzzies. And we talk about this all the time, and we call this enlightened self-interest. In many ways, it is, you can't just volunteer your time as a mentor or volunteer with the AMA or whatnot out of the goodness of your heart, because that is that's gasoline that runs out very quickly on one tank. But what keeps filling that up is all of the other benefits you get from it. That's building that relationship, getting knowledge from that person. That knowledge goes both up and down. A lot of the mentors who are part of our mentor exchange program, I always joke, it's like we got people who graduate from mentor exchange who are senior managers and directors, and they want to join that program and be mentors as well. But I say to them that you haven't got enough gray hair. This is a very senior group of folks. And the reality is that they have had a very different experience being a senior manager and director as you have. As you know, marketing is much more executional at a higher level in your career standpoint than it used to be. There are directors who are executing paid search campaigns, and that a director would never have done that even 12, 15 years ago. They would have been much more what we would think of as a director back then versus what they are now. And for them to see that as a CMO or an agency leader, to understand that they can have the same set of expectations that they had upon themselves in that role when they were in that role 15 years ago, it's very different. And it really gives them that sense of learning of what it is and how can they potentially go back to their own organization and have a different set of eyes when how they manage their people, and have a different set of appreciation that you're not going to tell the top boss.
These as you know, this is a topic that's near and dear to my heart, and I think you've given a lot of points that I think a lot of us are going to mull over. And I think even just being part of the AMA, I think gives us a little taste of what a mentorship could be, and kind of organically finding someone, even if an organization is not willing to or have the resources to do so. But I want to thank you so much for being part of this, and I hope we can do maybe and if everybody loves the topic, I would love to maybe we do a educational event around something like this, because again, I think this is a great topic that especially people in the marketing field that are we're lone wolves sometimes in this industry. And so finding our people and finding someone to help guide us through this ever-changing industry is very helpful. So first I want to thank you, Craig, for speaking. And if you want to put your information, either LinkedIn or website into the chat so that people can connect with you, I would love that. Now we're going to start the networking breakout sessions. Paul, I think you might be ready to do that. So we're going to be putting everybody into random rooms to network, and then for a few minutes, and then you'll see a countdown. We'll come back to the main room, and then we will get dispersed into new people, hopefully if the randomization works out the way it should, and we will go from there. So Paul, wherever you're, go for it. Welcome back, everybody. I think we're slowly getting people back into the rooms. Okay, so is everybody back in the room, Paul?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So this is officially the end of the session that we have today, but first of all, I want to again thank Craig for his great topic today, and we'll talk later and see if maybe we can do an educational event or something around that topic as well. So that would be amazing. We'll chat later. So again, this is the official end, but I would like to Bob and a few of the board members will be more than happy to stay on if you guys have any questions about AMA, or if you'd like to further this topic or conversation, or if you have questions again about the organization, about volunteering, or just general want to chat, we will be happy to stay on and talk with you guys. Or this is technically the official end.
Leanne, can I interrupt before everyone leaves? Can I take I like to take group selfies in person, but can I use my screenshot tool if you're up for it, and I'll share it on social media?
Sure.
Give
I
me a
love these
second.
pictures.
Just got to call it up. I wanted to get your attention before everyone disappeared. If you don't want to be in it, disappear now. I'm just
And
looking
Craig's
at.
taking a picture of the picture. I feel like it's like kind of that like Justin Timberlake, Jimmy Fallon scenario where they keep doing the pictures of the pictures.
So here we go. I'm going to smile and do the screenshot, and I hope you all smile too. Here we go. Yay, yay, yay. I got it. Thank you. I'll put it up on social sometime later tonight.
Awesome.
Great, Craig. I really appreciate you coming tonight and talking and actually, you know, it was a couple of months ago when we were chatting in your role as a PPC folk. You know, you were talking about marketing leadership, and it was just such a concept that really captured my imagination as an AMA member. And I'd love to learn more about it, you know, if you've broken that out. I've actually been working on sort of, I'm calling it the marketing leadership concept now. And David, if he's still here, has seen, oh yes, David, I see you, has seen it, and also Bob, and then also Derek Ontrabaum, who was a chapter president back in 2001, as sort of helped with it. So I'd love to share some of those ideas. But do you have sort of more sort of detail about that marketing leadership concept, about where marketing leadership applies, and you know, is there more depth, or is there more body there, or is it? I mean, the concept in itself, I think, is really helpful, but is there more depth there?
I think the reality is until that organizations acknowledge the gap is there, it's never going to be fixed. I mean, the fact that we happened upon it because we have to differentiate ourselves in our marketplace. You know, other chapters might not have had that same experience because they didn't have to compete with a local marketing organization like a CMA, in which case we really had to land on a differentiator and made it super obvious to us that there was such a gap. And when we host like a CMO breakfast and we have our leaders there, we always ask them, it's like, you know, how are you investing in developing the leadership potential of your teams? And there's often an awkward silence, and they're like, well, we let them upskill and take certificates to the local business schools, but those certificates are usually skill specific. You know, whether it's getting a designation with the AMA PCM designation or something like that, it's rarely actually focused on their leadership skill sets, which means that you may have a leader who has great leadership expertise, but if they leave and they haven't passed it on, that person who takes over next might not have the same ability to navigate the organization, navigate at the C-suite table, making sure that marketing has a true voice. And marketing is going through a lot of disruption. A lot of times what we own is being lost. It's going to IT, or, you know, the new role, the CRO, etc. And that's because there is a gap. And I think that whether you look at your own skills and your ability to move up the ladder, if you can focus on leadership, you are going to get a lot further ahead to that top spot than somebody else. If you remember that stat, only 10% of people are natural leaders, but there's a good 20% chunk. Those are the people who are becoming managers and directors, if we can just develop them and give them an opportunity to have coaching or to have a great mentor, or have both, there's going to be an opportunity for that person to really thrive. And we've seen that. We've seen so many amazing stories of people who have gone through our programs and have truly hit through. People in the first year of a program, most of them are now CMOs of the biggest companies in Canada, or with global affiliates of US-based organizations. So it's powerful to see. I mean, we've been doing it for 13 years. A program wasn't successful, I doubt it would be going still. It's a lot of work to run these things, but damn, they have huge impact.
I had a couple of technical questions. How is the mentorship program managed? Do you use sort of like tech tools, or is it, a Google spreadsheet? And how do you score mentors? Is that again sort of a form, or is there a system that you use? Is there sort of more complexity on a tech side to that, or how is that managed from that perspective?
So we have two mentoring programs. The senior program is a lot more expensive than the junior program, because the junior program is designed to introduce young marketers to the benefit of being a part of an association like AMA. So it's basically the cost of being an AMA member. And so we charge $150 US for people to join that program. They get membership and they get access to AMA programming at the local level. We charge almost, I think, $800 for the other program. And that's because we have a relationship with the business school, the Schulich Executive School of Business, one of our top business schools, one of the top business schools in the world. We have an educational partnership, so we deliver education to those people. We hire data scientists every year to build our matching engine. It's a bilateral survey that our mentors and our mentees do, and it allows us to create really, really accurate matches. And then we look at that with a human set of eyes to make sure that there's no conflicts and whatnot. So all that to say, it's not fully automated. It is a lot of legwork. We do hire people to help us with things like building the matching engine every year, and then ultimately offering programming. So they have a graduation event, they have a launch event, they have like the cocktail party I hosted last night at my loft that they get to attend. All their food and beverage and the costs associated with those 5 different events are all included. So all that to say is we use tools like MailChimp and mail merging to communicate and keep people going. But ultimately the mentorship itself is very much self-directed by the people who are part of it.
Are all the mentors AMA members, or are they not? Okay, that's interesting.
No,
that's interesting.
No. Yeah, we didn't want to create that as a barrier. We did try that one year. We charged them $250 and it included membership. But it created a little bit of a acrimony. And so, they're giving a lot of time. They are only committing to an individual. So we did not want to lose the mentor because of that. But I would say we do offer them the opportunity to purchase the volume rate of membership. And we probably get 12 to 15 of our mentors join each year. But the two programs generate 100 members a year for AMA Toronto.
Wow. Yeah. That's great.
Go
ahead.
I kind of wanted to, maybe other people kind of feel this way too. I think specifically in marketing, I think a lot of, and again, I'm curious if people have this feeling as well. A lot of marketers are like one-man bands in their companies, like they don't work for other marketers. And that was honestly my issue and why I actually sought out AMA is because I'm like, I actually have never worked for another marketer. And I had, as you had mentioned in the beginning, like insane imposter syndrome. I'm like, and I'm with this new company, I'm a director now. They're like, well, you're the expert. Tell me. I'm like, am I? I don't know. I'm like, I know what I know, but like, you've never been able to bounce those ideas off another marketer. And so you actually don't really know. And then you come to AMA and like, everyone's like, no one knows what they're doing. Everything. I'm like, great. Okay. So we're all on the same playing field here. No one knows what they're doing. Great. As long as I'm like not the only person. So I even if you guys don't have a mentorship program, because I've been part of a forced mentorship program in other organizations before. And I feel like it's kind of like being on a bad date. Like, it's just like that you can't get out of. you're like, all right, well, we're here, we're in this, and we're just going to make the best out of it. And I think what you're alluding to in the presentation, I think it doesn't necessarily mean like someone higher up as someone that understands you, and like psychological safety. I think that's the main thing between like being able to be vulnerable, I think is a big thing, as opposed to being a forced mentor who's like, well, this is how I did this. And I'm like, okay, well, we work in construction and you're a guy. And so this, no offense. I'm like, we're not on the same planet here. So I wonder if everyone kind of has that scenario. I think that's an issue, finding someone, a mentor that actually understands marketing as well.
David,
Yeah,
you have a background as a coach, but
I just want to, Leanne, it's an interesting point, but a leadership coach would work with someone who had that issue and work on why you believe that you have to have all the answers and why you can't work collectively amongst yourselves to find all the possibilities. Because there is a tendency for us to collapse on ourselves and believe we have to have all the answers. But a good leader will bring people together and try to maximize or optimize the collective wisdom.
And I think there's to your point, I think there's a great balance there. I think there's a lot of leadership skills that can be, no matter what that person industry is in, I think you can gain where that psychological safety comes in. I think there's I think what makes it a great relationship sometimes too, is like if they understand marketing and are able to at least appreciate that. Because a lot of my prior mentors were in like finance. I was like the numbers people, or sales, which have different objectives and different perspectives. And so like, I think maybe having a married relationship, having like maybe kind of more of like a leadership mentor, within your organization, and also having maybe a colleague type mentorship where you can bounce ideas off from a marketing perspective, where you can, maybe be a little bit freer to talk about organizational situations. Because again, to your point, Craig, like how safe are you with a colleague that's, in the executive suite from a mentorship program? How safe are you really kind of like, I'm talking to HR, but like, is this, I think that's removed when you're like talking to someone in AMA that doesn't have a dog in the fight,
That absolutely, and it can't just be that they're looking that they shouldn't feel like they're doing you a favor. It needs to be, they need to recognize that it's coming back to them too. They're learning from you. It's a shared experience. You're building a relationship together, and it's not one directional. And that's where that sense of safety comes from. They're not, and you're only going to be, most people will only be as vulnerable as the person will be with them. And you take a risk. If the other person doesn't meet you there, you're never going to do that again, right? So that's where that deep rapport building comes from, and that's why deep relationships come from these mentorships that are effective. That person is showing up because it's not a favor. It's they're actually doing it because they care. They want to be vulnerable. They want to learn from you. They want to help you and whatnot.
I guess I would just say that I would add to what you said, Leanne, and ask ourselves, why do we always believe that we have to have all the answers? Why are we vulnerable if we don't have all the answers? I
say that question for my therapist too. I mean, that we're going, everyone, we're getting into burns here.
Hey,
This is
before
such an
Catherine,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I want you to jump in. It's going to take like 10 seconds. This is like a common thread in the book I wrote. I felt a lot of what you're saying, Leanne, my whole career. And that's why I've always been open and vulnerable and transparent with people, so I can form those relationships that Craig is referring to, or John is referring to, that we're all referring to. I think it's opening yourself up to others and finding those who will open themselves back up to you. Go ahead, Catherine. I didn't mean to steal any
No, that's
thunder.
okay. I think this is so important because I'm gonna age myself right now, okay? I've been in marketing for more than 30 years. And when I started, there was no internet, okay? And now we are supposed to understand so much that is changing every day. And it is outrageous when you go into an organization and the expectations are, you know, so analytical, right? And I'm a storyteller, marketer. I'm a content marketer. And the expectation of, you know, when I look at it, when I look at the job descriptions and what you're supposed to know, the certifications you're supposed to have, and it's really, it's stunning, because I have led team after team of people, right? And I have a huge amount of leadership skills. But if somebody expects me to be Google certified, HubSpot certified, understand all of these different data packs, it's like, what? And the idea that we're supposed to know everything and know, I mean, it's not realistic, right? So it's just so, this is the best thing I've heard tonight, because, you know, again, I've been in this business for a really long time. And thank you for being vulnerable and saying the thing that we're probably all trying to figure out. What do I need to know? How much can I learn every week to stay on top of what's changing in marketing?
Well, and so, I mean, and this, I mean, thank you for kind of like, so David, honestly, it's a complex that gets shoved onto us on a regular basis to know everything. I have clients that I do a myriad of like marketing retainers, like all over the map. And if I miss like one thing, or I don't know something about one thing, you know,
Oh, yeah.
it's
Well, it
catastrophic.
may depend on your circumstances, though. What you
Yes.
need to know in front of a client is very different from what you need to know when you're sitting down with 9 other people who have a collection of wisdom. I mean, the goal of a leader
Yeah,
is
I'm
to
gonna tell you, I have no
maximize
idea.
the potential of others.
Oh, in front of you guys, hey, I'm like, I totally won that. Like, I have no way, like I shot from the hip on this one. I hope that I was right. But in front of a client, I think what I'm getting at is like, it doesn't help the complex there when it comes to like, I think from your point, Catherine, like we're being told, well, why
part
do
of
you know?
Yeah.
part of
Go
the
ahead,
issue
Jim.
is that there isn't a structure or a culture of allowing a discussion about what you don't know and you do know, right? And that's one reason why when I came across agile marketing and really understood the aspects of that. And if you don't know, agile marketing comes from agile development, but the agile mindset, one of the big aspects is transparency. So being able to discuss, you know, what you can do and cannot do. And I think one of the reasons why agile marketing is so powerful is because when there isn't a situation, you know, when you're in a situation and there isn't a methodology for how you manage marketing, you do have agile there. You then have a methodology that the VP of sales and the CEO say, oh, it's not John or Sally who is bringing their particular take to things and they're just trying to get the most out of it. Rather, it's an agile, it's the agile approach in the sense that you're being more transparent, you're revealing what it takes, what you're focused on, the task that you're focused on, and you're having an open conversation with members of your team and the other stakeholders in the organization. And so I think one of the real powers I think of agile in agile marketing, and the reason why people should use it, is not because it helps on the process, but it's really giving you this mechanism for having a conversation about that vulnerability. That's the real issue, because you couldn't possibly know all this stuff, and you never can. I mean, I think about
Like,
technology. Yeah.
I wouldn't, think that a podiatrist would, be able to help me, like, a neurologist. You know what I mean? Like I wouldn't expect them to, someone fixing my foot is not going to, help with like my brain. I would expect to see someone different, for
Well,
that.
if you go, your
Unfortunately,
primary care doctor,
we're all
that-
PCPs
no,
here.
what
You know?
usually sees you for general things or simple things and then outsources anything that's specialized to a
Yeah.
specialist. But what you're saying, Leanne, and I've seen it, what we're all kind of alluding to, Catherine, you think you've been in business a long time, I got you by a bunch of years. And I used to be just a writer for like 20 years until the internet came around. And then all of a sudden I'm a digital marketer, digital communicator.
Right.
And that means like going from wearing one hat to wearing like 20 hats. And I've, lived, breathed, worked that. And it's not, it's a great transition for anyone who's going through it. And I agree with you, the job descriptions, I feel bad for anyone entering the job market nowadays or changing jobs because the job descriptions are out of control, unreasonable.
So,
Leanne, the other side of, one of the difficulties with vulnerability is it's a feeling which we don't like, right? But if we can't break through that feeling, we can't grow. And that's kind of the tragedy of we all go through that, where we feel vulnerable, we don't want to have that feeling, so we just avoid it. But if we can be courageous about that, we can actually grow.
Right.
Otherwise we can't.
Well, to illustrate that, I mean, I think that there's this dynamic that marketers have that they have to be perfect. And so that if something comes over the wall, oh, we have to do it, right? No, you don't. You have to have an open conversation with the VP of sales and the CEO and say, look, we just had a wonderful meeting last week where we talked about the 15 things that we're going to do over the next two weeks or the 3 weeks or whatever. And you just threw another one over. That means that those 15 things aren't going to happen. And that, if you have that conversation where you don't have something like Agile as a mechanism, then I think that it's harder to have that conversation because, oh, you're refusing to do the work, you can't do it, right? But if you're building a process and you're describing the process of how you're working, where you're focused on these certain tasks and I can get it done and I can commit to that. But if you give me another one and I don't rearrange my tasks, I'm never going to be successful. So I think that's why it's so important to have an open and transparent conversation with folks.
Well, and that's and why I reached out to AMA, and I kind of had an informal mentorship with Megan, the past president, because I was like, hey, I need help here. Like I have this new job. It was just recently in the pandemic. I have this new role. I need help here. And I think what AMA has been very helpful with is being like, okay, I'm getting a lot of my directives from either sales or from, business development or, other vice presidents in other areas. What is okay to push back on? Like, what is like, okay, no, this makes sense. And like, cause I felt like I was doing all of the things that all of these people wanted and some of them justifiably, but being able to be like, actually, this isn't from a marketing perspective, I want to being able to understand like what is okay for me to push back on. Cause I never had someone I never worked with. I'm like, I just do whatever, sales or whoever is telling me to. And I've never really been able to like, no, this is what marketing needs to do. We will do what you want, but I just was never able to have that. And so AMA has really helped me being like, okay, no, I can stand my ground on this one. Like marketing's important. Like I have goals, I have objectives that I need to, I'm not just working for sales.
You're not an order taker.
Right. I'm like, no, Leanne, you can do this. Like, and so, again, being a person in marketing that's never worked for another marketer, AMA was very helpful. And being like, no, I can do this. Like, I can say no to this or say maybe later, this is an objective that I have.
So sometimes it's not your fault if you become an order taker. It's sales' fault who doesn't know how to fully leverage the power of marketing.
Well, yeah, isn't that a good point? You just raised that, Leanne, and also David, which is that if you only let the marketers do their real job, right, which is marketing, instead of the creative design department or whatever, then all of a sudden you're going to have a lot of better leads. And it's about having that open and transparent conversation with sales to reveal what you are doing. And they go, oh my goodness, that's amazing that you can do all this stuff. And then all of a sudden, once you start delivering, as long as you can manage them to such an extent that they're not throwing too much over the line. So they then begin to realize, and they start speaking up with the CEO and basically say, oh no, we want the marketer to do this because they're going to get me more leads and I'm going to end up happier as a result. That's really,
that's a really important point, John. And having that conversation, which is a uncomfortable, hard, sort of risky conversation, has to be had.
Yeah.
Well,
This is making me, I think we should do an educational event, have a panel. Let's get 2 people in business development. Let's get 2 CMOs and let them duke it out. Let's see like
Also-
how can we work better together? Let's get into the ring together and see like what, because I've actually had experience with a great relationship with business development before. And I've also had some not some great ones
Also,
before, but I
Leanne,
think that could be a great educational panel. Like,
I agree with
how
that.
how can we hold hands?
I think also someone from either coaching or human resources, because where I'm going with this is I think it touches upon soft skills not being underestimated in business today, when in fact they're probably needed more than ever, because technology has changed everything, that the pandemic changed everything, and we need to come together more, but I don't see it happening. I see more competitiveness and more disagreement, yet we need to be able to get along as teams. And so, yeah, you get those 2 different groups together, great, but I think there needs to be intermediaries.
But that's where Craig's coaching, leadership coaching, is very, very critical, and it's underappreciated. The impact it could have is enormous. I mean, it's interesting that, Leanne, you use sort of get them into the ring, because we perceive confrontation as conflict, and conflict is dirty, it's bad. It doesn't have to be that way. You can confront somebody without punching them in the face, but that's how we perceive it.
I didn't mean conflict in a bad way.
No,
good things come out of conflict all the time.
That's how we all feel about it. It's a conflict. And conflict is pejorative.
Yeah, and I don't.
One of the things in the junior program that we have for the 24 to 30-year-olds, there are like 5 different areas of that, things like, how to network, how to build relationships. One of them is difficult conversations. And because the earlier you can command a difficult conversation, you are not avoiding things that could have been done 6 months ago or earlier, and you're not running away from an issue, or you're commanding the conversation. Leanne, it's hey, that sounds like a great question. Let me get some more information before I give you an answer there, so I'm not wasting your time. Like, John, you mentioned it, there's 15 other things we need to think about. We can't look at it on its own. But that's more experience, and it's so great. And that's why I came to AMA as well, and it was I have my own business. I want to be exposed. I want to develop my leadership skills. I want to be part of something bigger than my smaller company, and try new marketing technologies and tools, CRM, all of that. I got to do that because of AMA, and it's so as you get more experience and build your leadership potential, and you're going to command those conversations rather than feel nervous about them.
And there's some neurological science to foundational science that would change the way you would approach it, but most people don't know it.
I wish we had recorded this conversation, because this would be a great YouTube video. This would be a great video.
It is recording.
We are recording.
I think we should take a snippet. That's awesome. I'm serious, because this is the kind of conversations that are needed, and it's a great promotion, frankly. And I'm not thinking, self-serving because of AMA. I'm just thinking in general for marketing professionals, business people, what is needed in the workplace.
Well, Bob, it gets to the core of the issues in the profession, right? And in the sense that we look at that statistic from McKinsey about the tenure of CMOs getting less and less every year, although I don't know if the pandemic had some cause of that. But I think it's because of this issue of a lack of transparency and openness about what marketing can do and cannot do. And CMOs being willing to talk with sales and the CEO and the CFO about those issues. And if we can help marketers to have those difficult conversations, they're much more likely to to remain and then get to do their real job. I mean, part of the issue is that often, I mean, sometimes, yes, people don't have the necessary skills, but that's another issue. Then you have to be transparent about it and acquire them or get the right people. That's what we as marketers, that's what we're managers. We don't have to know everything. We get somebody else to do it, right? But I think that if we help folks, if we help marketers solve that problem, and that's what the AMA did 100 years ago when marketing was this new thing and we were just sort of inventing it, and we're kind of in that stage right now 100 years later where we're inventing the new marketing. So if we can solve that problem, we're going to help marketers, but also we're going to help business and the country and internationally.
Well, I can't even tell you how much better I'm going to sleep tonight just hearing you all talk about this issue, because it is driving me mad. I'd love to be part of that, and I'd love to figure out how I can contribute to that.
I think
Fantastic.
I think that sums up, really what AMA is really about. We're just people helping people. You know what I mean? We're just here to make everyone feel a little bit better about themselves and their lives. But I know we're about 35 minutes over from our original end time. But I think this has been an amazing conversation, and I think we should definitely do maybe another educational event, maybe even something just as informal as this. Hey, we want to get on and we want to constructively talk about issues and things that we want to help change. And I can talk to Bob and Paul and see if we can maybe get that going in for 2023, and let us all,
thanks, Lee. And I want to finish up on one thing I'd add in that, and just that, you nailed it on the head about AMA. I mean, AMA is the essential community for marketers. There are 3 parts of the brand pillar: coach, badge, place. We're the good coach. We're here to give you advice and share ideas. We're that place. We're the marketing Starbucks. We're here for you to find your community, and that's the place. That badge of credibility. This looks great on your resumes. You're part of an organization that's bigger. It's the largest association for marketers worldwide, and it's something that can really help you leverage it. The best value you'll ever get will be from volunteering for the organization. So I just wanted to finish up on that. Thank you so much for everybody for having me as well.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Leanne. Thank you, John. Thank you, everybody.
This has been amazing, and keep an eye out for emails. We have Mingles coming up and events coming up in the new year, so keep an eye out.